Nagu Ruwindawu. We at Chronic Pain Australia and panellists acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet across our beautiful country. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. Coming to you from the lands of the Turrbal and Yagara people, the warmest welcome to our community of chronic pain warriors and carers. Our deepest thanks to the panellists who meet with us today, the nearly 3,000 contributors who provided their voice to the National Pain Survey, and all the volunteers who continue to support Chronic Pain Australia. A warning today that we will be talking about some heavy topics, including suicide ideation. Please reach out to services like Beyond Blue, Lifeline, and PainLink if this affects you. Now let's get straight into it with a video that we produced showing the key findings from the National Pain Survey.
Chronic pain is an invisible condition that affects 3.6 million Australians. Stigma and misunderstanding can be a vicious cycle. In our 2023 survey, more than half of people living with chronic pain said they have felt stigmatised by healthcare professionals. Many are forced to reduce their use of opioids to treat their pain. 4 in 5 struggle to remain active. 9 in 10 struggle to get the restorative sleep they need. 42% are given antidepressants or other medicines with severe side effects to manage their condition. 45% end up self-medicating with alcohol, non-medicinal cannabis, vapes, or cigarettes. 76% say they have developed mental health issues, and 1 in 2 end up having thoughts of taking their own lives. Help us break the cycle of chronic pain. Become a pain changer today at painchanger.org.au.
This year's instalment of the National Pain Survey, which presents the voice of people living with chronic pain and their carers from 2023, marks the 8th year of consecutive data. What should concern us is that the most common medical condition in Australia and the leading cause of disability is largely ignored. Over 3.6 million Australians are struggling with the impact of daily pain because they can't access or afford care that appreciates how much pain impacts every aspect of their life, and because they live in a culture where pain is dismissed or minimised. I'm really pleased to announce that we have a very special guest opening the session today, the Honourable Shannon Fentiman.
Can I begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which I'm coming to you from today, the Turrbal and Yagara peoples, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm very pleased to be able to open National Pain Week 2023, which aims to draw attention to the experience of those who are living with persistent pain. We know that chronic pain affects more than 3.6 million Australians and can have significant impacts on all aspects of individuals' lives, including social and mental well-being. We also know it's one of the leading causes of disability. National Pain Week 2023 will spotlight how strong and resilient individuals are, even when living with persistent pain. And it's a reminder for all of us that simply getting up in the morning, going for a walk or a run, packing the car with groceries and getting them inside can be so exhausting and debilitating for someone living with ongoing pain. Across National Pain Week, we look forward to hearing some positive stories and learning more about the tools and resources available to support people living with persistent pain. We also recognise the importance of working with the community to hear these stories, and we're really pleased to partner with groups that advocate for Queenslanders who are living with pain. Queensland Health is proud to fund and partner with the Australian Pain Management Association to provide consumer advocacy and health system navigation for our patients. APMA provides critical services and supports that truly increase the overall quality of life to thousands of Australians living with pain. In the year ahead, APMA will be delivering a number of fantastic initiatives, including the development of a new module-based pain support group framework, which will offer a wider range of topics and social supports. And we know how important these groups are. They are proven to reduce isolation and loneliness and connect people with a community that understands their experiences. Another initiative is the establishment of a new adult and young adolescent pain support group. APMA will continue improvements to the PainLink helpline, and they'll continue to advocate for the work and priorities of the Queensland Persistent Pain Management Clinical Network. Our pain and advocacy organisations simply couldn't operate without the dedicated, committed team of volunteers and health professionals. So I would sincerely like to thank each and every one of you for supporting Queenslanders living with pain. Of course, it would be remiss of me not to mention those who are living with pain conditions who are watching today. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your stories, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you to deliver better outcomes for Queenslanders living with chronic pain. Thank you.
Thank you to the Honourable Shannon Fentiman for that address. And I think it just really highlights the importance of winning the hearts and minds of our community, our politicians and key stakeholders to ensure that chronic pain is on the map. And I really want to acknowledge that work of Renee Rankin and Australian Pain Management Association for getting those services available through Queensland Health and that funding scheme. And hopefully we see other states coming on board to help support the essential services that APMA provides. Now, it wouldn't be National Pain Week without acknowledging the founder of Chronic Pain Australia, Dr. Coralie Wales, and we couldn't think of a better acknowledgement for Dr. Coralie Wales than actually moderating today's session at the State of Pain panel discussion. And Coralie Wales was also provided an Order of Australia this year for her vast contributions to the chronic pain community. So I'll leave you to Dr. Coralie Wales.
Thanks very much, Nicolette, and thanks very much to everybody here in the room for being here and sharing your various points of view. But just a comment that none of us would be here unless there was a massive problem in the experiences of people that live with chronic pain. And I guess when you look at the results of the survey, you could be forgiven for saying, well, nothing much has changed. I'm going to challenge that and say that people are much more comfortable now than they were 20 years ago to talk about pain. And that's really good because it enables people to connect with others. Back in the day, I remember people saying that they didn't think that anybody else had had an experience of pain like they had because they didn't hear it spoken about. And I'm really, what's the word, I guess, gratified, pleased, that now we are talking about it, and unless we talk about it, we can't change anything. So thank you very much, Nicolette, for steering Chronic Pain Australia. And I think if nothing else, if we can get the word out, and I guess now we're talking to all of you who are watching this panel, talking about the results and talking about how we can collectively change what's going on. It is a hopeful message. It is not lacking hope at all. We now talk about it. We know that the problem is huge, and together we can change things by sharing our stories, by talking to our politicians, by helping them understand the size of the problem, and for everybody in this room, in this panel, to be working together hand in hand to respect the work of each organisation. And we're going to go through that little bit by little bit today. There's a discussion going to proceed today, which is along the outcomes and the findings of the National Pain Survey. And I want to hand over to our esteemed guest, Holly Crawford, who is an Australian snowboard half-pipe athlete who competed internationally between 2002 and 2018. She's a 4-time Winter Olympian, the 2011 half-pipe world champion, and has claimed 4 World Cup wins alongside 16 other World Cup and World Championship medals. What a champion you are, Holly. And I guess a lot of people who are watching this are going to say, wow, you did all of that and you live with chronic pain. And I think, you know, it's really testament to the idea that people in pain are really strong, whether you're an athlete or whether you're a housewife or whether you're a worker or whether you're a child or whether you're an old person. You have to be so strong to just keep going every day. So, Holly, can I hand over to you to speak about that, please?
Sure, Coralie. Hey, and thanks for having me today, guys. Absolutely, as you say, it's not easy living with chronic pain on a daily basis. Look, a lot of mine was self-inflicted, I suppose you could say, from the beginning, because snowboard halfpipe, sure, a lot of you don't know what it is. It's an awfully dangerous sport, one of the more extreme of the extreme sports. I was, latterly when I retired, diagnosed with endometriosis, which those of you who know about endometriosis, I'm sure, are aware it comes with a lot of pain too. So look, I think that Colarie's comment on, you know, people being strong, you know, and being in pain and having to, I suppose, deal with this on a daily basis. I think you become strong having to deal with pain on a daily basis in this fashion, and you sort of have to create your own pathways to deal with it. You know, pain's a very subjective issue. You know, my mother will often say, oh, my back really hurts, but it's nothing compared to what you feel. And I always say to her, no, Mum, your back pain may be worse than any back pain that anyone's felt in their entire life. You know, it's very much dependent, you know, on the people and what the people are surrounding themselves with at the time too, I think.
Thanks, Holly. And I'd like to just underscore that it doesn't matter what you do in life. If you live with chronic pain, you do develop resilience and strength, and you're not alone. And everybody in this room knows that. Can we go around the table now and just introduce everybody? I want to start with, can I start with Renee? Renee Rankin from the Australian Pain Management Association is doing really important work. Renee, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So, as you said, Renee Rankin, I'm on Yugara and Turrbal land in Brisbane. I have been the CEO of the Australian Pain Management Association for about 2 years now, and I live with chronic pain myself, and I started as a volunteer, so it's been an inside-out journey.
Thanks very much, Renee. Congratulations on doing such important work. And now can I go to Professor Mark Hutchinson, please? Professor Mark is from the Australian, let me see if I get this right, the Australian Research Council Centre of Excellence for Nanoscale Biophotonics. Oh my goodness. Over to you, Mark, just briefly.
I come from University of Adelaide on Ghana land, and I'm also the chair of the Pain Solutions Research Alliance, which is seeking to unify activities across academia, government, industry, and having the pain consumer at the core to find new solutions. And through that, I also am the president of Science and Technology Australia, which represents 145,000 ideas creators across the research sector to hopefully help them understand what we can do in pain. Thanks, Coralie.
Wonderful work. Thanks, Mark. Thanks for everything you do. Can I go now to Monica from Pain Australia? Pain Australia, of course, is championing the work of chronic pain by lobbying, advocating politicians should invest more to transform systems that are around people in pain. Monica, a brief introduction, please.
Thank you, Coralie. I'm the Deputy CEO of Pain Australia. I'm standing in for our wonderful CEO, Julia Jones, who unfortunately can't be here today. I've been here with the organisation about 2 years, and I also live with chronic pain. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Monica. Dr. Kieran Davis is the Dean for the Faculty of Pain Medicine. Over to you, Kieran, for a brief intro.
Hello, welcome. I'm Kieran Davis. I'm a pain specialist actually in Auckland in New Zealand, but the Faculty of Pain Medicine is a binational college. And I spend a lot of my time at the moment in Melbourne and in various parts of Australia.
Thanks very much, Kieran. And can we now hear from Joyce from the Australian Pain Society? Welcome, Joyce.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So Joyce McSwan, I'm the president of the Australian Pain Society. We're a 43-year-old organisation, and we represent the multidisciplinary sector of pain management. And so it's a really lovely collective of allied health through to medical staff, through to specialists. Aside from that, I'm also the director of the Gold Coast Primary Health Persistent Pain Program, and also PainWise, my own organisation. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks, Joyce. And last but not least, of course, Nicolette, you are the current president of Chronic Pain Australia. And I was talking to my husband this morning. I remember 10 years ago, 2013, where we were planning a virtual National Pain Week when I was working in Armidale, and it's even older. The National Pain Week is even older than 2013. I think it goes back to 2010, 2011.
Yeah, you've done a tremendous job, Dr. Coralie Wales. Yes, I'm Nicolette Ellis. I am president of Chronic Pain Australia. Also happen to be a registered pharmacist. I guess my passion for chronic pain comes from my own experience. My wife, Kelly, who's probably online watching today, lives with chronic pain, and we have a huge number of family members who also live with chronic pain. So we volunteer our time to advocate for those and just do these really special events like today. And just a reminder for those people who are online to drop some questions into that group chat so that your questions can be answered by the panelists.
Thanks, Nicolette. I'm just aware that the National Pain Survey has turned up some interesting new information, and one of those is that there is a degree of what's called medical misogyny when accessing healthcare. I wonder if anybody would like to speak to that. Holly, do you have any comments on that front?
Yeah, I was in a male-dominated sport for near on 20 years. You know, and our coaches were men, our doctors were men, you know, my teammates were men, you know, the judges were men. Obviously, I was surrounded by a lot of men, and I can absolutely guarantee you that, you know, in the afternoons when we came home or when we're, you know, drinking protein shakes at the gym, you know, we're not sitting around, you know, talking about menstrual cycles or, you know, if we're extra fatigued because of something like that, you know, we're not giving scores on all those sorts of things. So yeah, look, it was a difficult journey, I think, and I think the other problem with it is that when you're in these environments, you know, you don't sort of twig to these sorts of ideas because you're not sitting around discussing them. You know, they don't come to the forefront. So I think again, it's an awareness issue, which I find these things often are.
And Holly, it's interesting, isn't it? Because one of the topics that came up in the National Pain Survey, and it's not new, is this idea of the emotional and mental toll of chronic pain. And that's probably compounded when you've got a woman's problem. Endometriosis is something that we've only really just started to put a spotlight on in the last 5 or 10 years. And it's a serious problem. And it changes women's lives. I mean, it probably changes their partners' lives as well, because it can have a massive impact. But I imagine that there's also a huge emotional and mental toll that goes with that.
Absolutely. Obviously, you know, menstrual cycles and a lot of, well, look, a lot of things. Women are mysteries, aren't they? A lot of things to do with women are not really, haven't really been researched. You know, it's becoming more and more. And absolutely, you know, when you're in a situation like that and you are dealing with sort of these, you know, taboo issues, you know, and I to a certain extent, I sort of tried to push it, and, you know, I like to make people feel uncomfortable. So I was very pleased to push my teammates and, you know, my coaches and things into places that they don't want to go like that. But it definitely is an issue when people don't feel comfortable to speak about things, you know. So it's a combination of all these things, isn't it? It's people having an awareness that there is even an issue because they might feel pain or they might, you know, have these problems, and because no one's talking about it, they're scared to talk up. And then on top of that, maybe a taboo issue where they're scared to speak up because, you know, there could be all these sorts of, you know, connotations around it that they feel, you know, there could be cultural issues. There's any number of reasons why women in particular won't speak up about pain or suffering. And, you know, it is a very big problem that thankfully people are becoming more aware of in this day and age.
I think that's it, isn't it? I imagine, Renee, that you hear a lot on the line, on the phone line, from people who are feeling so isolated that they are just over it.
Absolutely. We're seeing an increase in the distress of our callers. I mean, the statistics coming through on the National Pain Survey, with 1 in 2 people saying that they're contemplating taking their own lives because they're feeling underrepresented, unheard, physically and mentally, everything is taking a toll. That's huge numbers and something we should be jumping at. I wanted to note that we've seen an increase in calls coming from people identifying as men. So last year that was around 40%. This year it's up to 53%. So, you know, awareness is there, but it also jumps out to me that it's deeply troubling that 65% of our LGBTQIA+ community have contemplated taking their own lives as well. That is so concerning and something that we should be doing something about. Definitely. I have some ideas on contributing factors, but we'll play that out in the session today.
And of course, if anybody listening to this is in that situation themselves where they're just over it and they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you can always ring PainLink, who takes calls from people. And also you can ring Lifeline and other organisations that you're comfortable with. I wanted to move on to the idea that although this hasn't...
Carly, could I just comment on just...
Yes,
I think one thing we always talk about is people, you do need to make the phone call, you do need to make that contact with somebody. But one thing people never focus on is why make that phone call? And one of the things when people are suffering in chronic pain is sleep deprivation and rumination. That people are lying there all night with thoughts circulating in their head continuously when pain just lighting up the room, and picking up the phone and talking to somebody. It won't treat the pain, but it does help with the ruminations, and it does help kind of get some clarity around those thoughts that are coming into your head. So pick up the phone.
Yeah, good advice, Kieran. Thank you. I think that, you know, it's funny, isn't it? Because we talk about loneliness and we talk about social isolation, but you do have friends, because anybody that's watching this that feels isolated, that's why Chronic Pain Australia exists. That's why Australian Pain Management Association exists. We connect people, and we do have a central purpose that's our central purpose. That's why we do this stuff. And Nicolette's already said that there's a lot of volunteers who stand up for people in pain. And I think it's always really important to know you're not alone. And as Kieran says, just pick up the phone. And people are becoming much more aware that pain is not in your mind. Pain is an experience in your body that keeps you awake at night, that makes you worried about the future. Who am I is a common question. But you are somebody who's got great strength, and we really want to hear from you if you're in trouble. So that leads us into another related topic, which is that stigma is everywhere and has been for a long time. And I'd really like anybody in the panel who'd like to speak to the problem of the stigma of chronic pain, thinking that it's about somebody being weak, rather than understanding that it's about somebody being strong and living with that pain 24/7. Any comments from the panel on stigma?
I'm happy to talk to it, because it's something that really frustrates me, in that I get colleagues come in and going, I've got this patient with chronic pain, and I go, and then they'll go, how should I treat them? I said, well, no, you've got somebody suffering in chronic pain, and treat them the way you treat everybody else. You know, that they're not, you know, yes, they're suffering, but they're the same human being as everybody else on this screen here. And the implication of saying, I've got a chronic pain patient, is that it's their fault and there's something wrong with them psychologically, which is different to everybody else in the room, and it's not true. So I think we have to fight the stigma.
And really, it's all about the systems that don't cope with people with chronic pain, isn't it? Because quite often it's the doctor will go, oh, no, not another patient with chronic pain, because it is really complex. It's not a straightforward linear problem. It's not something you can wave a magic wand or deliver a pill and it's all over, Red Rover. It's something that goes on and on and on. So I'm very interested in what's available. I know that there were some comments there was a finding in the National Pain Survey that hospital-based pain clinics weren't getting a great rap. And yet they're full of good people who try really hard to help the problem for people that are living with chronic pain. How does that work? Why is it that hospital-based pain clinics are not getting a great rap?
Coralie, I can certainly speak to some of that. I don't represent the hospital pain sector, but we work very closely with them. A lot of my work professionally is in the primary healthcare sector, and we're around to support the burdens in the public hospital sector to alleviate, some of the traffic jam that goes in that door. Really, I think stigma is more about the system and then about the patient. It's almost that mirror of the reason why patients feel so stigmatized and so invalidated, and that goes to shame and guilt and adds on to that, is that the system just doesn't equip itself, nor is it able to have the resources, time pressures, money pressures, and that's not reflective always about the people in there. The people are very well-meaning and the people want to do what's best. Sometimes there may be a little bit of communication, issues, and we're working a lot on that. Even with the pain faculty there, in educating clinicians to be mindful of how they communicate, 101 communication back to the receiver, the patient. So there's a whole range, I think, of complications and complex issues as to why someone ends up feeling sort of that way. And sometimes when they're not heard as well, you do have to make your point. And sometimes that's misinterpreted as the fact that you're making a pain up or ruminating or catastrophizing. So there's a lot of communication issues, I think, that ends up one feeling very stigmatized, and also on the other side, the healthcare professionals feeling frustrated that they want to do more but they can't. So all that sort of comes out in play. So as you can see, it's complex. I think one of the things patients can do, and just a very quick tip, is if you do feel that way, say so. Please say so, that this conversation is making me feel quite stigmatized, and in a very proactive way, try to help each other understand each other. To me, I think that's important for everybody's learnings as well, there and then. Otherwise, they go away silently suffering that nobody's hurt them. So call it out there and then. It's good for everybody. And I think doing it in a respectful way, both sides, is really important. I think it comes down to communication, which we're working really hard at educating both consumers and allied health and medical staff as well. I certainly share Kieran's frustrations on that, and we try and lead by example.
Joyce, it's really about relationships, isn't it? Because, I mean, you've just said it'd be good for the patient to give the feedback to the clinicians that the situation is making them uncomfortable. And that's really important, isn't it? Because we've got to get to much more of a level playing field where the patient feels that they're able to say something. And if you're underslept and you're cranky because you're not getting any relief or any management strategies that are working for you, it can often be a bit of a tricky thing, I find. And so trust is really important, isn't it? And maybe that's what we're talking about, that if you have a 3-week pain program with a bit on the end and a bit of preparation at the beginning, that's just a snapshot out of somebody's life, isn't it? It's just such a brief moment when you think about the 24/7 years and years and years down the track. So it's really important that we think about the relationships that we have around us, and it's got to be bigger than a pain program, hasn't it?
Absolutely. And to the clinicians as well, don't take it personally. I mean, when you have a person in front of you who's in pain, see the situation that they're going through. Don't judge the patient for that. And sometimes it comes out of wanting to help and being helpless in ourselves as clinicians, and that comes out wrongly. But absolutely, it is more than pain program. Pain program, as you say, is a very small, and it's almost an appetizer, no matter how long that pain program might be. It might be 3 weeks, it might be 6 weeks. Dealing with a chronic situation, it goes beyond that as well. So yeah, that's really important to get the expectations right, both sides.
So thank you, Joyce, and thanks, and Kieran, thank you too, because I know that a lot of the faculty will be people that provide pain programs, and a lot of those people who I've known for many, many years are such good human beings, and sometimes the patient has to find the team that works for them, and it might not be that every single person in a pain program is going to have the right chemistry for you, but we're looking.
I always start my consultations by saying I'm going to be very honest about whether I can help you or not. And when we've looked at our clinic, 30% of people find us utterly useless and walk away thinking they've just wasted an hour and a half of their life. And that, you know, I take that on the chin. I can't help everybody. I wish I could. But I think, you know, particularly in Australia, there's a saying in healthcare that for every problem, there are 7 solutions, and that every state plus the federal government has a finger in the pie. And so that around the Medicare system, Medicare doesn't fund allied health particularly well, if at all. But then in the public sector, allied health are fairly well funded, but the interventions and the procedures aren't as well funded. So there's this discrepancy in funding and structures within the healthcare system, which means if you need an intervention, you need a procedure, and you go into the public sector, you're unlikely to get it, and vice versa. So it's something we're working on. We're working on with the Pain Society and other people around this room to get a bit more fairness in the system, to allow people to act, you know, whether they're going through the Medicare or the public sector, they get the same healthcare.
Good point. Thanks, Kieran. Look, we're running a little bit behind time, and that's my fault. I apologise. But I would like to move on to the next important topic, and that is research and chronic pain. And we're going to introduce you to Mark, who is going to make a comment on the findings of the National Pain Survey into research. Over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Coralie. So, colleagues, the National Pain Survey has a really important additional section added in the last couple of years, asking you, pain consumers, what do you think about people like me doing research and the types of research that's being done? And this is crucial. This is a change in practice for the classic academic. Who knew to go and actually ask the people who they're trying to help, what do you think is important? That has not been done systematically anywhere globally at the scale that CPA has enabled. And what we have learned from your answers is that you don't trust people like me to do research. You don't have an understanding of what we think is important and how that will help you. That has come through loud and clear. And that's one of the reasons why the Australian Pain Solutions Research Alliance has formed, specifically so that we now place consumers at the centre of the fundamental discovery, science and technology work that we will be doing into the future. You need to appreciate how much of a profound change that will have across the global science, research and technology sector. It changes our vision of an idea. Oh, we're excited, we're doing some geeky science, and then we're going to publish a paper about it. And then we put that paper onto a digital bookshelf and it gathers dust and it helps literally no one. We need to break that system and we need to change it. So we have a brilliant idea, we test it, we formulate it, we get it out the door, we actually do something useful to help people like you. That is logical. That's what we should have been doing, but we have not had the whole system connected up before in Australia and globally to enable this. And so together with CPA, together with the brilliant people on this screen, and together with you, we want to take pain ideas into pain solutions and actually have that happen at scale so that the drugs that we have available aren't 40 years old through to the oldest drug that human civilization still uses today, opioids, are the frontline treatment for pain. We actually have evolved dynamic precision medicine tools to help people live with pain and perhaps, as we've heard in the survey, maybe one day start actually talking about pain cures, whatever that means. We don't know how that will look, but we want to start walking hand in hand with you moving forward.
That's great, Mark. I mean, you know, from my point of view, listening to thousands of people that live with chronic pain, part of the solution is community. because there's only so much that funding can do. It's about how does everybody understand the reality, and how do you hold hands with people in pain and level the playing field.
And holding hands not only with people who have pain, but then across the scientific discipline divides. We are wonderful at creating ivory towers of brilliant international excellence that's completely disconnected from reality. So how do we take those brilliant minds and brilliant capability and turn that into useful resources for the pain community? And as we've talked about today, creating conversations across those divides is absolutely crucial. And that's something that within APSRA, we're really passionate about doing in having communities of practice form like this.
I think it's really powerful, Mark. I think the idea that you're holding hands with consumers who are directing who are providing direction for research, what actually will make a difference, because people in pain are experts. They're experts on the experience of living with chronic pain. And that's an expertise that researchers may or may not have. So that's fantastic. Well done, Mark, and well done, Chronic Pain Australia, for putting that section in and really taking research to the next level. I've done a fair bit of research with consumers in my research team, and consumers in research teams tend to keep it really anchored in what matters. So I hope that some of the listeners today, some of the people that are in the audience today, put their hand up to be involved in directing, in consumer leading some of the research. Well done. I want to go now to Monica from Pain Australia. Now, Pain Australia is an important organisation. It was set up in 2011, I think, to lobby governments for better spending, better allocation of funding. And I wanted to ask you, Monica, what do you make of the National Pain Survey findings on funding for the pain sector and public discourse?
The survey's found, of course, that funding for pain is a lot less than for other important areas such as cancer and that. We're way behind in what we get funded. And I think what we need to do is, we're doing it now, we're starting that conversation, but we've got to get louder. And we want to get the community and governments want to fund chronic pain. I think that's the key. You know, everyone else goes with their research and which you need and your reason and the need to fund your condition, but we're competing. And what conditions such as mental health did 25 years ago is it broadened them out to the community, and they got that broader support. So governments at all levels, and we're talking at all levels, we need to go to our councils, to our state governments. You know, we had the Queensland Minister just then, that was wonderful. We need to go to our federal. It's not just the federal, it's everyone, and we need to go broader. So we need to make more noise. We need to demand attention. Sometimes we have to talk about the bad. We have to demonstrate to people the impact. And while we need to show the positive stories, we have to talk the figures here about the suicide ideation. We have to show how bad it is when you live with chronic pain, and we want the community and governments to want to fund us. And so by doing that, we will get the funding. So today's a great start. Events like this, we've got to broaden it out. We've got to get to bigger communities. We've got to make sure that people want to fund those with chronic pain. And I think that's the key.
Yeah, well said, Monica. Thank you very much. And thank you for the work that you're doing, lobbying governments and trying to make more sense of how we, the people, invest in our healthcare. It's too easy to sort of shove it under the rug. It's, you know. So, I mean, the elephant in the room, from my point of view, with the pain conversation for the last few years has been the opioid I'm going to say it, I'm going to call it out. I'm going to say that there's a little bit of overzealous opioid phobia. And it's true that inappropriate prescription of opioids is not helpful. But it's also true that I've known many people that take a low dose opioid and they manage their pain and are able to get on with their lives. I've known many. And then I've also known people who are suddenly taken off their opioids and they become quite desperate. And Chronic Pain Australia certainly has had calls from members, families saying, sorry, don't send the emails anymore because my father committed suicide last weekend. after being taken off opioids. So this is not helpful. But I want to hand over to Dr. Kieran to get your take on this, Kieran, because I know that as a pain specialist, you'll have a very nuanced view on this.
How long have we got? I think a couple of key things. I'm one of the people on this screen who isn't suffering from chronic pain, and if I were to be put on a high dose of an opiate by a doctor for a long period of time and then have it withdrawn rapidly, I would get pain, even though I started pain-free. If you are suffering in chronic pain and you go on to opiates, put on opiates by your doctor for a period of time, and then they are withdrawn rapidly, you will get 100 times more pain than I would get, because you've got pain to begin with. And in my view, that's a form of torture. And I also think withdrawing, the 101 of medical school consent is people have to agree to a treatment, but they also have to agree to the withdrawal of a treatment. So I cannot see how you can force somebody off a treatment that you have initiated, or us, the medical profession, has initiated. I personally think it's unethical. I don't know if I'm going over the top there, but that's my view.
Well, I think when there's suicide involved, I think you have to talk about ethics. There's no way of avoiding that.
I think it's when human beings are involved. These are people suffering, and rapid withdrawal or forced withdrawal without consent I think it's unacceptable.
I think you said the other day too, Kieran, that if somebody was already taking a dose of an opioid medicine and they were managing their lives, that you would have that conversation about, well, what's working and what's not.
Yeah.
What is it?
The evidence for opiates has been weak for a long time, that they actually do work. As you say, Carly, there are some people who are on them and get on with their lives without an issue. And that's the vast majority of people who are taking opiates. My view is they're not painkillers. They put a bit of space between you and the pain, but they don't really kill the pain. But what I would generally do is I have a conversation with people, a very long conversation with people about stabilizing how they use them. If you miss a dose, if you have a good day and say, I don't need to take them today, what you do is you go into an acute withdrawal and you make your pain worse for the next 3 days. So that take them on a regular basis, take them on a time contingent basis, and accept, you're on them and they're supporting you or helping you. If you want to withdraw, that's a different conversation about how you do it in a slow, progressive, controlled manner. But rapid withdrawal, missing doses, varying doses are generally not good for people.
No, thanks, Kieran. That's really good advice. And I wanted to, while we're talking about, what do you do?
We've also had a really good question around opioids directed to Renee, asking how many calls do they receive at PainLink around opioid deprescribing and enforced tapering?
I would say over the last 4 to 5 years, it would be about 45% of all the calls we take is around opioid deprescribing. And I'd say a quarter of our calls are all around medical gaslighting, which I think, goes hand in hand with opioid deprescribing.
So that's the stigma. So the opioid issue has created more stigma for people that go to, I know I've heard stories about going to a pharmacy and the pharmacist not understanding that you can't call somebody drug dependent in front of a whole lot of other people in a pharmacy. It doesn't help at all. But there is hope, because Mark, you've got something for us on the pain toolkit, I believe.
Yeah. So just in the last 3 years, the final, 5 years, I should say, one of the last things that Trump did in the US, which was good, if I could say anything about Trump that's good, he pushed an extra $1 billion into the National Institutes of Health research program to create a new generation of pain mitigation strategies. Now, these are non-opioid, non-addictive pain tools that will be coming through and are currently in clinical trials in the US at the moment. This means in the coming years, we're going to have 5 to 10 to 12 to 15 new types of therapies that are going to be available through pharmacies, hopefully on the PBS, and pain specialists like Kieran will be prescribing these types of new medicines. This is an exciting innovation because it's actually meant we've had to go back to the building blocks of what we actually understand creates acute and chronic pain conversion. And there's a lot of new science and a lot of new understanding that's coming through from the science geeks like me to actually have some real world impact. Now, that means that there's an opportunity here as well in Australia. We're going to have a range of pharmaceutical companies, hopefully the good ones, who are coming into the country and saying, we need to run clinical trials here in Australia. That provides an opportunity for pain consumers to be part of those clinical trials. But at the same time as we're having those conversations with clinicians and with pain consumers, we need to be advocating to our federal and state leaders to say, these drugs are coming, and by golly gosh, you better be planning in the budget to put those into the subsidies for the PBS so that we can actually have these rebated and we're not paying $27,000 a year for a migraine antibody. That's not sustainable. We need governments to be ready for that. So that's the challenge that we have, to start getting our elected officials and the departments excited about writing the legislation and policies for these new innovations to come through.
Yeah, good point, Mark. Thank you. And I want to do the full circle now around back to Holly. Holly, you started this this panel with what it's like to be somebody who lives with chronic pain, and I want to know what your take on this panel has been, and also I believe you've got your own experience with opioids.
Yeah, I've been on opioids, I've been off opioids, I've been addicted to opioids. I've had the joy of trying to deal, with all of that. I had a lot of friends that would, you talk of stigma and things, they would crack jokes, like, oh, you little old druggo or something, and there you are just sort of trying to deal with your pain and manage things and do what you can to sort of get through your days, basically, and you've got all of these feelings about it. Mark talks about these people in their ivory towers, doing all their research and everything. And I suppose the question at the end of the day is, how do you connect to these people in their ivory towers who are obviously trying to do really great things, to the people on the ground in dark rooms that don't want to talk to anyone today because they can't even get out of bed and they haven't slept in 48 hours and they haven't eaten because they keep throwing all their food up, and the only thing that they really might have had maybe is their drugs, or the only thing that really is helping is to sit in a dark room. And what these people need is that community that you were talking about earlier, and to bring all of those people together, because I know that from the endometriosis and working with all of them, the biggest thing that people say after I do a speaking engagement or after you put these stories out there is that it's these stories that bring people together, and people sit there and they go, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one, and I'm not the only one struggling with this. I'm not alone. And ordinarily when you're in pain and you haven't slept and you've got all these Kieran was speaking of these loops that go on in your head when you lie there in bed, and to even have someone come in and if you're in pain and you're having a bad day, you don't want necessarily someone really bubbly to come in and be like, hey, how are you today? The world outside is a great place. No, absolutely not. Bugger off. I don't want anything to do with you. But to have someone to maybe just be there, to sit there, to bring you a cup of tea, to call you out of the blue on one of those days when you're having a really bad day, and connect, because humans as a general rule, we come from tribes, we come from communities, and we thrive in those communities. And I think that's what is most important, is to find those communities and get those communities to the people. Yes, absolutely, drugs are good, but I think it's this support and having a connection to it, knowing where to find it, having it easily and readily available for the people and free. I think that's what's most important.
Because of course, when you're in chronic pain, often your financial resources go down the gurgler because you can't do what you used to do to make money. So it's so true, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, to be fair, sometimes when I've been in that really, really bad place, I'm not even looking for a solution anymore. I'm just trying to get through my day. Yeah.
Look, we've got 10 minutes to go, and it's been a really stimulating conversation. I want to thank everybody in this room. Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Renee. Thanks, Kieran. Thanks, Monica. Thanks, Nicolette. And thanks, Joyce. You're all doing fantastic work. But in particular, Holly, thank you for sharing your story and being an inspiration to others to be able to open up and talk about what's going on and not feel like you're weak. In fact, you're very, very strong. And I think it's time now to sort of throw it open to any questions that the audience might have. And Nicolette, you would have some questions.
We have some really interesting questions and some really tremendous and heartfelt statements as well from the audience, which is nice to see everyone connecting within that community group as well. So one of the questions I think that has been on everyone's minds for a while is NDIS. And with chronic pain, it doesn't seem like that's a condition that's supported under the NDIS. And from my experience, working with people in pain, they usually do this under a mental health to get NDIS access. So I was wondering if Monica Boogs had any conversations with Bill Shorten, who's holding that portfolio, and if we can get that, get louder and get chronic pain on the NDIS.
Thanks, Nicolette. And I think that's a really good point, because we even struggle to have health professionals sometimes recognise that chronic pain is a condition in its own right, let alone, broaden out to those areas. So yes, look, we are working with politicians at all levels. We're having an event in September, which is up at Parliament House. We have invited Bill Shorten because we think that looking at the NDIS is such an important area and pain needs to be there. So, and he's talked about the fact that he wants to look at it. So this is our opportunity. So we will take, I'll also get from you any of the comments about it and all, any of the issues, because it's a conversation we need to have. And that's part of the recognition of chronic pain by everyone, not just health. It's that talking about that community, it's talking about other aspects of our system, and our community need to look at chronic pain. And that's the only way we will get funded. We can't just be pigeonholed.
And of course, to get that system going where you do include NDIS, you need consumers to partner with the design of how that looks. What are the relevant services that people need? Having people in pain central to that conversation. Sorry, Nicolette.
I was just saying, and crazy, leading cause of disability is chronic pain, and it's not under the NDIS in Australia. So
totally, and that shows our issue of recognising chronic pain.
Nicolette, can I also say that the Australian Pain Society are doing some areas in that, because there's a huge cascade between disability and pain, and some of the tools, clinical tools themselves that are used traditionally for chronic pain aren't always translated and used well, and can't even be used for disability. So, for example, cerebral palsy. Those poor little children in pain, the tools that we traditionally have for, the Breathe Pain Inventory tool is not appropriate for those little ones. So we have a huge gap in workforce understanding it. The system from an NDIA, even having a word called chronic pain there. So it's all systems. So I think everyone has to really try to impact that area. Certainly from our area of responsibility, we're trying to, and certainly under my presidency, we're trying to educate the allied health areas in what is even disability in chronic pain. So coming in from that angle, but I'm really hopeful that hopefully the start of this conversation can really educate from all prongs of the sectors involved to help out.
Absolutely. Another question, probably Mark is our best panelist to answer this one. Eliza Jane Hunt is wondering what research grants are currently available for pain research, and do many of these actively recruit researchers who are consumers themselves?
Oh, Nick. So only in the last year, 1 year, has the Medical Research Future Fund made a call specifically for pain research. Prior to that, we were covering all of the research under the National Health and Medical Research Council broadly, and not in pain-specific domains. And last year was the first MRFF. And my frustration for my brilliant colleagues here in the pain consumer advocacy domain, they will get a phone call the week before these grants are due saying, oh, we need to consult our key colleagues here who are living with pain. That is nuts to do that. So we're trying to shake that up and actually work with the department and say, dear department, you can put $4 million into a research grant and all of that money goes to academic boffins and there's zero money allowed to be spent on paying consumers' time and effort on this, that's wrong. So this is where we actually need to really shake the whole system up and say, dear department and dear government, or perhaps insert expletive here rather than dear, you need to actually change how these systems are funded so that we actually can have a professionalization of the active, valid contributions of the paying consumer to be central to the questions that we're asking. Now, we want to see more of that. The US have put $1 billion into it. Let's do it. What can we do here in the country to create a paying solution?
It's very interesting, isn't it, that you don't get any brownie points as a research author for having consumers on the team, and yet you have to have consumers involved somewhere along the line of design. How does that work? Yeah. I mean, it doesn't make sense. So
this is the challenge. So our colleagues in the cancer domain and in cardiovascular disease have started to do this. There are lessons we can learn that are already out there, but we in pain need to do much better at actually bringing the whole team to the table to actually create the solutions fast track.
Any other questions, Nicolette?
Yeah, I think this is a really great question to end on from Pauline Barker and to go around the panel. To the panel, what would be the best advice you could give about living with chronic pain, and what have you or haven't you learned from people that live with chronic pain?
Should I go if we're going around the room? I don't think I know what to say. There's so many things to say. Look, I think I've learned through my pain that the best thing to do is to surround yourself with community, and to surround yourself with community that understands as best they can what you're going through. And that's, again, is this, you know, it's pain is subjective, you know, and it's making people around you aware of what you're feeling, because they can't see it, they can't feel it, and they don't know that's there. So I think it's you know, being aware of that subjectivity, being aware of your community around you and what's, you know, what's out there for you. So I suppose, again, it's the awareness, it's getting community around you. And, you know, as Mark says too, it's connecting those people in those ivory towers to the people on the ground, because we had it a lot, you know, with our training regimes. You've got all these, ordinarily, dare I say it, men sitting in rooms making up ideas about what athletes should be doing to make themselves better athletes. And we're on the ground getting all of this funding given to us in all these weird places that none of us really understand why, when we've been sitting there asking them all this time for what we needed. So it's been connecting those people in those towers and the people in the government and the people with the money with the people actually suffering from the problem, as opposed to people making things up along the way that serve their purposes.
A good recipe for system change, Holly. We go around the table, we've got, let's say, 20 seconds each to give an answer to that. Can we start with Joyce? Your 20 seconds starts now, Joyce.
Absolutely. Great question, Pauline. I think the things I've learned so far very much from these all this time with with patients is one, that you are so strong. You are truly so strong. And a heartfelt thank you for teaching all of us so much, and for your immense patience while we wrong you sometimes, you know, and really, really, truly, I think you need to hear that we're sorry.
Thanks. Your turn, Kieran. Counting down.
Yep, very quickly, talk about it. I think, you know, people say they stop talking about their pain because everybody else is awkward. It's their awkwardness, it's your pain. They just have to live with the awkwardness a bit more.
Nice.
And the thing I've learned is watching people get knocked down by life, by pain, they pick themselves up and they get up again. And I'm in awe of those people.
Thanks, Kieran. Your turn, Renee.
I'd say call something like PainLink, 1300 340 357. Best thing we do is validate people's experiences. That's what we're there for. And we know how strong you are, and I think we need to get our acts together and fight for these people, because they're warriors already.
Great advice, Renee. Your turn, Monica.
I've learned to be open about it, shout out about it, and I don't care if people are awkward or don't like me talking about it. I do.
Thanks, Monica. Mark.
It's the statistical significance doesn't matter. It is down to a precision understanding of your pain, your experience, and what makes your lives more enjoyable. That's what's important.
Can I just add to that and say that what I've learned in over 25 years of being with people in pain and being in pain is that it's not about the people, it's about the systems. And we tend to personalize it to an individual and say, oh, well, the individual is not strong. But it's actually the systems that are faulty. We blame the person for the system failures. But finally, Nicolette, your 2 cents.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of love for Holly, and I think that just shows that the lived experience and sharing your story is so powerful. And connection to me with family, friends. If you don't have family and friends, I've met some wonderful patients over the years. One comes to mind who had a snake called Fury, and that's how she also thought about her chronic pain and was her best advocate and pain support. So animals, snakes, cats, dogs, whatever takes your fancy. I think that connection and that support and sharing your story is so powerful.
Thanks very much. Thanks to the panel. Thanks to you, the audience. I hope you've got something out of this today. We certainly have. And I'll throw back to Chronic Pain Australia.
Thank you everyone for your time today, and we hope you enjoyed. All of our resources are available on our website and the National Pain Survey. There'll be more happening during the week, so please tune in. You can always review these later at another time. All the recordings will be available up on our website, chronicpainaustralia.org.au. And thank you again for your contributions.
Excellent. We are a wrap. Well done, everyone. Congratulations.
Thanks, Carrington.
Thank you, Holly.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Thanks,
Holly.
all.
That's great.
Now,
Carly, thank you.
Nicolette, would you like to do a quick debrief with all of your guests today?
Yeah, I just want to say a very heartfelt thank you. I think that was excellent. We had some really outstanding comments online, and Holly, obviously you made it even more impactful with your lived experience. So thank you so much for sharing that. We'd love to have you back in the future, and everyone else who contributed today. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and it was a bit of fun as well, talking about a heavy topic, but I think we got through a lot of really interesting, deep information.
Yeah, guys, and look, I've got a lot of time for this. So if any of you need a hand, with your research, or, someone to speak up or be a voice for something, I'm often around. If I've got the time, I'd be more than happy to help.
Holly, where are you based? What state?
I'm mostly Sydney based. I spend a lot of time on the South Coast, but yeah, so Sydney.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I might well be in touch. Lovely.
Yeah, no worries, Karen. It'd be great.
Awesome. You might be inundated with that.
That's
with
all
that
right.
information.
It's all right. I did say, what I can fit in. I'll do whatever I can. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for your
Holly,
generosity.
any last words of wisdom?
No, not really, guys. I suppose just keep doing what you're doing. I think it's all of this stuff is really great. And it's, as I said, it's the same with the endometriosis. It's the same with any of these sort of smaller bits on the side that are trying to get some awareness around them. And I think it's really important, and I find pain. I think pain is very important because, as I kept saying, it is so subjective, and it's completely debilitating, and no one can see it. And it creates so many ongoing other issues, that people, I've been lucky enough to have the support and have, the education and just everything around me to know so much about it. And I think it's really important to get that out to the other people that are struggling.
Wonderful.
And before we go, I just want to say thank you to Carly. This is not possible without your vision so many years ago. Been a great fan for many, many, many years. I've never met you live, but you've been quite instrumental in all my work. I'd like to just say that. Way back 2010. So well done.
It has gone back a long time, hasn't it? Nobody talked about it in 2003. Nobody. It was just, and it was just a horrible Pandora's box that nobody wanted to look into. So I feel really grateful, to be honest, because I burnt out And then there's people like Nicolette and Renee and all of you who are just continuing that campaign, that crusade. So important.
Yeah, thanks for your sharing today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
Cheers all. Bye.